This week, from the safety of my privileged isolation, I became inconsolable as the world's sorrows penetrated the safety of my lockdown. I was drawn into our world's sorrow by the news from India. In my comfortable living room, I watched the death of a mother in a crowded, ill-equipped hospital. As this mother slipped away, one of her sons begged for medical care for his mother, while two of her sons desperately administered CPR. When the doctor finally arrived, she took the mother's pulse, and in seconds the sons were wailing in grief as the doctor confirmed that it was too late. The son who had begged for help began wailing and shouting, screaming and rocking back and forth, inconsolable in his grief. Holding my breath in a hopeless attempt to hold back my tears, I felt myself rocking back and forth with this grieving son, and the words of Scripture rang in my ears. Over and over again I heard, "Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are no more." On this Mother's Day, Rachel's tears are magnified by the tears of millions. Millions of mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, husbands, wives, grandparents, and children are weeping, and like Rachel, they refuse to be comforted. As the third wave of this pandemic ravages our planet, there is lamentation and bitter weeping. And like the biblical Rachel, there is power in the sorrow of those who grieve. In the Hebrew Scriptures, Rachel refuses to be comforted. The prophet Jeremiah alludes to this matriarch of Israel, the mother of Joseph, weeping over an event which happened generations after Rachel's death on the road to Bethlehem. Rachel's tears are for the descendants of her children's children's children who have been carried off into captivity by the forces of empire. In the Christian Testament, the anonymous gospel storyteller we know as Matthew summons up Rachel's tears as his response to the slaughter of the innocents by the forces of yet another empire. Confronted by the horror of unspeakable tragedy, our tears flow. We weep, we wail, we rock back and forth, and we refuse to be comforted, for there is power in our sorrow, a power all too often muted by the comforts heaped upon us by the powers of yet another kind of empire, a financial empire, the likes of which the world has never seen before. I know full well the need we all share right now, not to let the overwhelming suffering of millions consume us in a flood of tears. If we dwell upon just a few of the millions upon millions of tragedies happening all over the world, we run the risk of drowning in our own tears. There's a good reason for our individual psyches to be working overtime to distract us from sorrow. It is no wonder that our collective hearts and minds distract our very selves from the pain and the suffering. Occasionally, a tear or two escape when the suffering comes too close to home and compassion gets the better of us. But as the song says, tears are not enough. Ever so quickly, our privileged lives grant us the comforts of home, which soothe and sap the power of sorrow to move us beyond the safety of our splendid isolation. What few tears flow are quickly dried, our fears are quelled, our compassion is muted, and we return to our new normal of coping with, while complaining about, the inconvenience of lockdowns. Perhaps a prayer wells up in us, a remnant of a long-rejected belief in the grand puppeteer sky god, a just-in-case kind of prayer, there's no harm in trying kind of prayer, even as our minds scream, hopes and prayers are not enough to face the magnitude of sorrows. But if the divine mystery which we call God is not pulling the strings, how then do we face this suffering? What comfort is there in a mystery which is beyond the beyond and beyond that also? If we let our tears flow, what power will save us from drowning in a sea of despair? I remember the breathlessness of the weeping man wailing in sorrow for his mother who could not breathe, and now I too must catch my own breath as the image of the almighty puppeteer sky god's void functions like a vacuum within me. I am not sure I have the courage to refuse to be comforted. Give me that old-time religion so that I can find comfort and breathe freely again. As the wailing son's tears threaten to overwhelm me, I find myself gasping, gulping huge breaths, breathing as deeply as I can as if my own intake of life-giving air can support his desperate need for comfort. From long ago, another voice calls to me from the wonderings, pain, and fears of our ancestors, an unfamiliar voice, a voice muted by the seekers of comforts. Her voice is not the voice of comfort. Hers is the voice of divine mystery, known to our ancestors as Sophia, named for wisdom. Her story is recorded in the wisdom books of the Hebrew Scriptures as she cries out for wisdom. In the midst of our world's suffering, I hear a thin echo of her words. Doesn't Sophia call? Doesn't understanding raise her voice? On the hills, along the road, at the crossroads, she takes her stand beside the city gates of the town. In the gates themselves, Sophia cries out, "Women and men, people of everywhere, I'm calling out to you. I cry to humankind. You who are simple, learn to make sound judgments. To the foolish among you, use your common sense. Listen closely, for what I say is worth hearing, and I will tell you what is right. For my mouth will speak the truth, and my lips hate to lie. Everything I say is right. None of it is twisted or crooked. All of it is plain spoken to those who understand, clear to those seeking knowledge. Accept my lessons in place of silver and knowledge in place of gold. For Sophia wisdom outsparkles jewelry. Anything you desire cannot compare to her." Those are the words of Sophia, the feminine voice of God in the book of Proverbs. These words, crafted as a hymn to wisdom by our ancestors in the midst of their own crisis, call to me like a voice, the voice of the mystery who dwells in, with, through, and beyond us. Perhaps you can hear it too. The voice of the mystery which is the love we call God, calling from deep within, speaking not words of comfort, but demanding wisdom. The suffering millions, their tears flow in rivers which cannot be stemmed by our desires for comfort. Only wisdom, discerned in, with, and through the love which is divinity, dwelling in, with, through, and beyond us, can move our suffering world beyond the placating comforts of wealth and privilege toward the kind of healing which restores wholeness. In the midst of all our suffering, let us offer our strength to this quest for wisdom. Let us refuse to be comforted at the expense of our neighbors. Let us wail when leaders refuse to waive patents for vaccines. Let us refuse to talk of budgets, deficits, and the need to store up our treasures. Let us scream at the horror of national, regional, tribal, or self-obsessed interests being put before the interests of our neighbors. Let us mask up and stand up in the face of ignorance. Let us cheer on the difficult choices of those who have carefully, generously, bravely sought the wisdom of science together with compassion. Let us shout on behalf of those whose voices have been drowned by their tears. Let us listen to the cries of the grieving. Let us open ourselves to the power of our sorrow and refuse to be comforted until the tears of the suffering millions are dried with the compassion of the mystery of the one which is the love, living, working, and loving in, with, through, and beyond us to heal the sick, comfort the dying, and feed the poor, so that justice and not tears can begin to roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Let it be so. Let it be so among us. Let it be so.